Hello everybody and welcome back to RP-1. It's no surprise that we've been struggling with our science and we are in a dangerous place right now where if we don't act quickly enough and gather more science, we may end up locking ourselves out, and that would be unfortunate. So today we decided to experiment with a few new engines on both the X-plane and the rocketry side in order to hopefully accomplish our goals. So let's go ahead and hop in. And we're going to start off with our X-planes. As you see at the top, we only have 1.6 science, not nearly enough to do anything with. We have a couple planes in our hangar already in production, and so we are going to need to adjust them. But we are going to forgo adjusting them on this time around, and we are just going to build a new plane based off the XP3. We are going to remove the XLR-11s in favor of the XLR-25s. I recently discovered these in the list, and I looked at all the stats on it, and I realized that this was designed for the X2, so the XLR-11s were the X1 engines, and so it only makes sense that we try out the X2's engines for our contract, because we're trying to go higher than we have ever before, and we're starting to hit the limit on how high we can get with the XLR-11s, and so I figured why not take a chance on a new engine, and we're going to try it out and see if we can't get at least the optional contract, because we're still not good enough to beat the Kármán line at 100 kilometers. So unfortunately, with this engine, it only has the one configuration, so all we're going to get out of it is the same kind of performance that we would any other time. So no upgrades for this, so unfortunately it's not going to be a long-standing engine. This is more of a test, proof of concept, and if this hits the ceiling as well, we may try again with a new design of our plane, maybe focus a little bit more on lightening our load to hopefully break the Kármán line. But for now, we are going to focus on one of the optional contracts to get ourselves some more reputation. And for that, we need to cross 75 kilometers. And so we're going to test this out, and this plane is actually going to be successful enough to do it. So after a good simulation, we're just going to compare our stats real fast on the XLR-11 to the 25 right here. So a much better thrust, kilonewtons of thrust, static thrust, and so hopefully that will translate into more power as we push our way through the atmosphere. We're gonna go ahead and tool this, because if this works, then we're gonna want to possibly make another one, especially considering that landing from such an altitude is more difficult the higher you go up, the less control you have. So we have plenty of funds, and so we're going to go ahead and speed up the build time and cost of the launch pad necessary for our rocket program. But since we're only losing $137 per day, we can very well time warp to its completion without losing out on too much money. And now that we are back in the positives, we can go ahead and hire some engineers. We have 250 on the DR6000, so we can put those on the Goldbird launch complex, and we're going to go ahead and hire a bunch more. We have the money, and the max amount of engineers you can have is 585, so we're going to want as many as we can get. We're going to settle for 550 though. We have no science in the queue, so there's no point in hiring more researchers, but we will eventually have to do that. So now, this is the product of many hours of testing. So unfortunately, I couldn't really consolidate the build footage to this, but it's a pretty simple enough build. We're using the RD-108s and the 107s as the launch vehicle, and the difference that we are using, we are going for the RD-105, and then there's a couple other numbers attached to it for our orbital stage. But before we get into all that, let's go ahead and hop in the cockpit for a high altitude flight of 75 kilometers. We got Stuart Kelly in the cockpit, ready to fly. We do need to adjust our controls on our control surfaces to make sure that we can point ourselves up quickly enough. We have over a minute of fuel time, so it'll be plenty of time to get ourselves up there, as long as we can get ourselves in an appropriate trajectory in enough time. Oh, 70 kilometers, excuse me, not 75. I brought up the Delta V stats so you can see how much fuel we have remaining, as well as the orbital info to show you what apoapsis we're sitting at. We also have our science tab up. We, of course, won't be making any science until we pass the 40 kilometer mark, but if we can stay above 40 kilometers for longer, and in going to 70 kilometers, that should be doable. We'll be getting more science than we had previously, and I'd like to try to get at least 4 science, because the solid rocket boosters, the next node, is going to be pretty useful going forward, having a decent SRB. But there you go. Our total apoapsis is going to be 88 kilometers. It's going to drop down a little bit, but not too much. We, of course, though, have no control up at this level. As you can see from below our altimeter, the atmosphere is practically non-existent, so our control surfaces don't do anything. Earlier iterations of this plane had RCS thrusters on it and nitrous oxide container to power it, but we realized that there's really not too much of a need. In future space planes, we're definitely going to need it, especially for the Kármán line flight. But in this one, there was no need. We could just free tumble our way down, because we only lost control for the last like 5 seconds of our flight, or our fuel. But if we're going to be going any higher than we are now, we're going to want to be able to maintain that control going upwards. So RCS will be in the future builds. But for now, Stuart Kelly is just going to go ahead and do his patented Kelly flip as he heads back for the KSC. Having a great old time, as you see in the bottom right. We've gotten a good amount of science from our high altitude flight, and we are rapidly approaching the 40 kilometer mark, so that will stop fairly soon. And with that, no more science is being had, so we'll close that in due time. But for now, we're trying to regain control of the plane. It's not very easy, but as you see now, our control surfaces are moving, so we have a slight amount. And as we peel through the thicker parts of the atmosphere, we can start to pull ourselves up. On our contract, we have successfully reached the 70 kilometer mark. We did that during the cinematic mode, so we didn't get a chance to see the contract tick over, but nonetheless, we have successfully done it. So as long as we can bring this craft into a safe landing, either on the runway or more likely as it will be splashed down, because unfortunately we did lose some of our forward velocity as we were tumbling around, and we ended up landing a lot closer, or a lot farther away from the KSC than we did in our test flights. Like I mentioned, with the we had RCS on a previous attempt, on the most successful attempt, and so we were able to successfully land there, but that was because we maintained control of our plane the whole way, so we were a lot closer. But with all that flipping around, Stuart Kelly lost a lot of forward momentum, so it's a solid 95 kilometers away from where his goal is. So he will be needing to touch down in the water, so as long as we don't break the cockpit and kill him, everything should go smoothly. We do now have air brakes on our craft, the first craft to actually have them incorporated. They shall be useful, but they're a little bit more useful for landing. With the way that we're going, they just they weren't going to be enough to stop us on its own. I had a momentary panic as the game stuttered a little bit when the cockpit hit. I thought it was surely going to kill him, but thankfully all it did was bust up our tail fins, so we'll have to fix that after we bring this back home. But there's still a little more life left in it, so we may fly this this plane yet again. But anyways, with that successful splashdown, we're going to go ahead and recall him back to the KSC and then get focused on our rocket. So 34 days added to his retirement. Going to be with us till March of 1968. We have 2.9 total science, so unfortunately not enough to unlock the SRBs, which is it's very disheartening because that really could have saved the rest of this episode. We'll get into that when we get into that, but if we had those SRBs, oh man, oh, that would have been so nice. But anyways, we are here on the launch pad. We're gonna do this footage sped up a bit because it does take quite a bit, and I do want to show you that we did try our best, but unfortunately I will let you know that this rocket does have some shortcomings. So we're going to start tipping ourselves over. Now that we're going over 100 meters per second, we're going to tip ourselves over. We like to do it every 25 meters per second of acceleration. However, in this launch, we're basically just kind of eyeballing it, clicking it over every few seconds or so, not really doing with any kind of consistency. We have Planet Shine turned up, so that way we can kind of see our rocket. We decided to launch in the nighttime because this has solar panels on it, and I'd like for the highest point of its orbit to be in the sunlight, so that way it spends the most amount of time with the solar panels having access to the sun. Drop off our side boosters and still have a thrust to weight ratio of over 1, so good to see that we're going to be continuing to go forward. Our apoapsis is now into space, and we're going to want a nice high orbit of this. As you can see in our delta V stats, we have a 7.5 minute burn time in our upper stage, so we don't want to just be skimming the surface of space and not let it have enough time to spend all of its fuel. So we're pitching over fairly slowly. And again, with no kind of consistency to speak of. I'll be better about that. And again, I am trying to take the time to learn MechJeb. It's just I don't have a lot of time in between recording these episodes and the other KSP episodes. It's hard to spend the time to risk failures in launches, and I don't want to risk any of our launches in this series in the experimentation of learning MechJeb. So we are spinning up to keep our spin stabilization going, and we jettison. And like I said before, we got 7.5 minutes of burn, so we are going to start our burn at 3 minutes and 40 seconds to the apoapsis. And as you see here, by having such a high apoapsis, it gives us the ability to kind of coast to our burn time instead of having to burn immediately. So we're going to time warp up. We have our RCS going, and it's kind of holding us in position, but it's also trying to counteract our spin, which is unfortunate. I don't know why it was doing that, why it was I guess it was just trying to hold us steady and kill the rotation, but there was no need. We went ahead and lit up real easily, as you saw there, before I even had the chance to acknowledge it. The ullage motors safely pulled the fuel back so the engine can light. And this is the RD-105. Yeah, I never experimented with this before in any of my playthroughs. I've typically just stayed to the AJ-10 series, and so I'm pretty excited to see if this worked. And now here's the thing about the failure of today's launch, is that this actually worked in testing. It worked right off the bat, right off the first try, it was successful. The only thing is that we launched during the daytime instead of the nighttime, and so I made that executive decision to change the launch date, but that was literally the only thing that we changed between the test flight and this one. And I'd be lying to say that I didn't revert to flight occasionally, that I didn't try to make this work in every best attempt that I could. I was convinced that the failure was in my flying, and that if I just paid a little closer attention, made sure that I staged at the exact right moments, that I didn't surpass a certain altitude, that I flew it just exactly correctly, that I could replicate my experience in the testing phase. But this is the final attempt of that series that you're seeing now, which is why I wanted to keep it all in one take, unedited kind of thing, just to show you just how baffled I was the fact that this didn't make orbit. So we are reaching the last 27 seconds of our burn, and as you can see there, our periapsis isn't even below 250, or isn't even above negative 2 millimeters. So yeah, this is not getting into orbit today, and it frustrates me to no end that it was so different from the test. But the way that I see it is that we're not gonna recall the rocket and rebuild it. We're gonna take this loss and try to go from there. And in the next episode, we're gonna really push forward and try to unlock that SRB, because I feel like if we had just one last little push at the end of this, we could have made it. But that is going to be for the next episode, and I'm pretty excited with this. It's a struggle. It really is. It's very frustrating, but once I get this correct, I think I'm going to be so satisfied, and I can't wait for that, and I hope you can as well. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP-1. If you did, think about subscribing. Drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.